Hey everyone, this is Andrew Fouts. I'm the Director of Digital Resources for CSRM and the host of Ministry Misfits. And today we want to invite you to join us at Reach Gathering 2021 in Ridgecrest, North Carolina, September 14th through the 16th. The reason we love to go to Reach Gathering, the reason we partner with the Reach Gathering is because we are all about resources and relationships, and especially these relationships with like-minded ministers that are able to come together and think about why we love sports rec and fitness ministry, how we want to see our communities reached with the gospel through these methods, and to talk about how to do these things from a theological and a biblical perspective. So we hope to see you all there. There's still time for you to register at reachgathering.org/register. And we would love for you to meet you all there at the CSRM booth, as well as all the other partner booths that will be there as well.
Following was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic through Zoom meetings in accordance with local health guidelines. Hi, I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Dr. Greg Linville.
Hi, welcome back to another CSRM podcast. I'm joined today with a great friend, longtime friend, and colleague in sports and rec ministry, Doug Cassidy. Welcome today, Doug.
Thanks, Greg. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and we are recording during COVID, and so we're not in studio, so to speak, but we are still trying to get the word out regardless of that. And Doug, I'm going to ask that you would give us your official title. I know it's kind of something like executive director, but the title of the ministry actually is Synergy, but what is that?
Sure, yeah. So I'm the executive director of Synergy Missions Solutions Network and Synergy Sports Camps. But yeah, as you mentioned, we actually go by Synergy or Synergy Missions or Synergy Sports Camps. And so what we do is we help churches do long-term church-to-church partnerships, and one of our specialties is helping them to do that through sports ministry.
And that's the name. There's a synergistic approach to what you do.
Yeah, and it especially stems from these church-to-church partnerships, in that when churches join together, especially cross-culturally or through different contexts, that there's a real synergy that develops from that. It's more than just the sum of its parts. It's that relationship and how God uses that relationship and his power and his work to generate something that's even bigger. And it grows and it feeds on itself and provides its own energy. So that's where synergy comes from.
And Doug, let's talk about that a little bit. You use a nomenclature of scoops. And I'm going to let you explain that in just a second, but people that are listening or watching today, this is an opportunity for them to actually get involved as a partner church. But explain to us about scoops.
Yeah, so scoops are sports-centered church-to-church partnerships. So it's taking that acronym, putting a couple of vowels in there so we can kind of pronounce it. But it's basically just focused on that, with church to church, the CCP part being the foundation, and then the sports-centered nature of it, or the sports strategy that's being employed, is kind of a description of that particular type of church-to-church partnership. And so it's taking the strengths of the missiology and the methodology that comes from churches approaching their missions and their mobilizations through a church-to-church partnership, and then combining that, as your audience well knows the benefits and the strengths and the power of sports ministry and bringing those two together. So thus, Scoops.
And so if an American church wanted to get involved, and what would that look like for them? And a lot of this is international, right?
Yeah, actually, most of the churches that we work with are seeking out international mobilization. However, I always want to be really quick to point out to all the churches that are considering this is it can be in any context. Now, it is more helpful if it's some kind of cultural or context difference between the two partnerships, because that brings a real beauty and strength. And we can even talk about that later, a witness of the truth of who God is and the power of God as the world sees people, churches, individuals who are from totally different contexts working together in such unity. Scripture tells us how that's even a testimony to God's kingdom and to his power. So all that to say is, in a local context, you can cross socioeconomic, ethnic barriers, even geographical locations within local context. And that can be a very powerful partnership right there where you are or in your state. Domestically, we have a lot of those type partnerships as well. For example, traditionally, it's been more like churches in the South engaging with churches in the Northeast or the Northwest, and seeing how that process of that church-church partnership comes together and has those same strengths as it does internationally. But back to the original point, most of our partnerships are international.
What countries are you involved in?
Yeah,
can you say that? Can you tell?
Yeah, it's no problem. We're in places that are not closed. For our largest network of churches are in Western Europe, mostly in Germany, and we do have some in the UK as well. And then we also have partnerships in El Salvador. Most of those are a combination of Scoops, but also community development type partnerships as well. So there's a strong combination there in El Salvador. And then, as I mentioned, we have partnerships in the Northwest and the Northeast. We've had a long history of partnerships, for example, in Long Island. We've had some in the Bronx. We've also now, it was rescheduled because of COVID, but also Seattle has been another one of the places. And I'm heading to Chicago the end of this week to do a sports flag football soccer partnership in South Chicago coming up this next week as well. So it can be any of those different contexts. That's the strength of the church-to-church partnership is the principles are universal, and the context, can be pretty pliable.
And so, what sports do you focus on, or do you have your strengths in, so to speak?
Sure. That goes back again to kind of the philosophy of the church-church partnership, because it needs to be appropriate for that context. And so thinking strategically and thoughtful about what that sport outreach is going to be or endeavor really comes and stems from the context. And so it can be any sport, even recreational activities or fitness. For the most part, it is basically team sports, because there's that advantage of bringing a group together and having that teamwork and that opportunity of competitive sport together that builds those relationships for the platform of sharing the gospel. So yes, mostly it's team sports. Now, our particular strength has come just from the amount of baseball camps that we have, partnerships that we have in Western Europe. And that's been an effective methodology for that context, because one, we know that often evangelism in Western Europe needs that relationship building foundation first. And so how can that happen in Western Europe? a great strategy of sports, but the reason they say, why baseball? Why not soccer? Well, the reason is it's a church-to-church kind of partnership, and we're coming from America to engage and walk alongside, let's say, the Germans in a sports camp. What can the Americans offer the Germans in soccer? Not so much.
Yeah.
However, we can really engage with the baseball strategy because it's something that is new and fresh. And the qualification for an American to kind of go and be a part of that is, do you know where first base is? Yes. Do you know how many strikes making out? Yes. All right. You're qualified. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's go. And so, and it's been very successful. It's a unique opportunity for the teenagers and kids in Germany. So once again, that's context oriented. But in other places, because of space, it might be flag football and equipment and cost, or soccer, or it can be recreation games, team building games, group dynamics, depending on the context as well. But for the most part, a lot of the methodologies and strategies and even resources that we have developed have centered on baseball, but the principles transfer to any sport or any type of methodology. And even for community development, the basic foundation is still going to be the same.
All right, so let's get into the specifics. A church contacts you and says, we want to become a scoop partner, or a synergy partner. Walk us through step by step, and what is the ultimate methodological model that they're actually partnering on?
Right. So the way our process works, and it's a little bit more lengthy, and that's by design. And it's also very personal because that stems even from our missiology, is we want to be sensitive to the context of even where we want to engage with the churches personally and get to know them and find out about where they are. And so that's building that context relationship even with synergy with the churches. So our process is making that contact. They can contact me, Doug at synergymissions.net, or visit our website at synergymissions.net or synergymissions.info.
And that's all coming up on the screen if you're watching. But if you're listening, you're on your commute to work or whatever on this podcast, you can just go to, just Google CSRM or Synergy, and it'll come up and it'll get you connected. Keep going, Doug.
Yeah, and also through our website, there's a little contact form you can fill out as well, and we're glad to get back to you as soon as we can. And yeah, and also I'll provide my phone number through that, 281-435-1908. But I want to get back to kind of the point there is, as we engage with churches in our process, you're not entering into a program, so to speak. You're into a process where we want to help your church accomplish your missiological goals and why you want to engage in sports ministry and why you want to engage maybe specifically in international missions, and dive into the process of understanding your context, where you are as a church, and even to the extent of having your church dive through a little bit of your theology and your missiology and how that informs your philosophy of missions. Because really what you're about is a missions endeavor, with sports being the strategy and expression of that. So you might have the sports pat down. You're just, man, you're a sports church, you're a jock church, whatever it is. You're excellent, you do a great job. But if you're missing that missiological foundation and missiology in that, then it's going to be extremely difficult for it to be all that God can intend for it to be, because you're missing his principles that he's put into place. And that informs your heart, that informs your methodology, that informs your relationship with your partner church. Everything centers around who you see God is, what's his kingdom about, why are you engaging in the kingdom, why are you mobilizing your church for this, all that comes into play. So we are more thoughtful in that process. So that was a long introduction to the point of we help churches evaluate where they are in their missiological and even in their sports ministry understanding, help bring those together. And then if they're really interested in finding partners that we also have on in our network who also have that philosophy. That's the other part too, is your partner also needs to have that same common ground of missiology and understanding what partnership means and what it doesn't mean. And so we have churches that we work with on the other side to help them to be equipped and ready for that as well, for the partnership to work effectively. And then we go through a process of discovery, matching, finding a potential partnership, and then an extensive amount of training. That's one of the pitfalls that many churches have when they engage in mission endeavors is they just see it as a project and they go and do something instead of really being prepared in all aspects of that. What's your missiology and your theology? Then how are you preparing for that? Cross-cultural training. How are you able to understand the context in which you're going? How you can do the best job relating and connecting to that culture, and then implementing the sports strategy. So we help churches to do a lot of training in that. While in a lot of our contexts, we already have churches in that in our network in that context with a new church, and they're doing that with that new church. So part of that process is for the partner church is also going through their training and equipping with our other partner churches, and then bringing all that together into fruition. And then the first year is a real exploration part of the process for the churches to get together to engage in, let's say, a sports camp, if that's where God's leading them and the context dictates. And then with the goal of a long-term church-to-church partnership that has for the ultimate goal, evangelistic disciple-making processes. This is the other really key important principle, not just the disciple-making, but the idea of the church-to-church partnership is not about your international partner's context. That should cause some people to pause. What do you mean? It's about God's kingdom growth in your partner church. No, it's about God's kingdom growth in both contexts. It's about what God's going to do through that partnership to impact God's kingdom in your church as well. How is this partner relationship impacting what you can gain and learn from your Christian brothers and sisters in Christ in your partner relationship, how they can serve you, how they can give back to you, how they can engage your context as well, and how that disciple-making endeavor is happening in both contexts through mobilization and growth with all those involved in both sides, how that impacts your outreach efforts and missiology in your own context. So all these things come to that ultimate purpose of what God is doing is these two churches work together in these two contexts. And then beyond that, if that partnership can multiply out and engage other partnerships and other multiplications, then you have a movement.
Well, you've talked and framed this as a process, not a program.
Yes.
And I think that's one of your distinctives, if you will, that you are. There's certainly programmatic things that come out of this, but it's the process of getting these churches to do some self-analyzation and then partnering with another one that's doing the same kind of a thing. And I can say in the years and decades that I've been involved, there's probably no one that is doing it as thoroughly, conscientiously, and significantly as you and Synergy are. I think this really is the top level that if a church wants to really engage in a partnership with another church, and we're talking about a local congregation in one community or country getting together with another one and figuring out how the two of them can do this better together than either one of them could do separately. we just really recommend all of our churches to this. We're coming down just to the last moment or two on this segment, and we're going to come back again on another segment because I want to pick up on some of the underpinnings of this that you kind of teased us with some of those theological foundations and that inform us in how we go and do things. And so we want to get into some of that because I also think that you are on the forefront of the thinking about this and what we would call in CSRM the three-tier paradigm. But people can really learn a lot from you, even if they don't get involved in your partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely.
But give me just quickly, if you could, 1, 2, or 3 reasons why should a church come to you and want to partner with another church? They're doing it on their own. Why should they do this?
Right. I think one of the main reasons to engage is helping your church to do this evaluation process. A lot of churches, it's just the American way. We see something, we go for it without going through a thoughtful process of why and how. And so what we can do is ask sometimes the questions that you don't necessarily know that need to be asked, but are really vital for healthy missiology and healthy implementation.
So the first thing is that it can really help them evaluate. What's the second or third? Why should they partner?
Yeah, part of it is also our approach of this is about whole church mobilization, not a segment of church. And the same thing is true for your partner church. So how can you mobilize your whole congregation in a missional endeavor and be engaged with sports ministry? That's also a crucial role. And then third is the opportunity to find churches that have a similar mindset already, and instead of trying to discover those on your own, we have a process that helps to vet churches out first so that there's much more potential for that partnership and can save, so much pain and heartache and resources.
That's right. Well, we're dialoguing with Doug Cassidy, Executive Director of Synergy Ministries and Sports Camps, and we're going to come back in our next podcast. And for Doug and I, that's going to just be in a couple minutes. But for you that are listening or watching, it's probably going to be a week from now that you're going to pick this up. And we're going to dive into some of the deeper water there. But it's important because unless you know the why, you don't know the what or the how. Yeah. And even if you have no intention on ever getting into the Synergy Network or the Scoops or anything, partnering with another church, Doug has some insight and wisdom that few people understand in our whole community of sports outreach. And you're going to want to be with us next time to hear about that, what we call the three-tier paradigm. So, Doug, thanks for being with us today, and we're looking forward to continued dialogue with you.
Thanks, Greg.
The CSRM podcast is a production of the Association of Church Sports and Recreation Ministers and their video production house, Overwhelming Victory Flix. Dr. Greg Linville is the executive producer, and Andrew Fouts is associate producer and editor. For more information about CSRM, visit csrm.org. For more information about Overwhelming Victory, visit overwhelmingvictory.org. The CSRM podcast is the flagship member of a new podcast network called Overwhelming Victory Radio. For more information on Overwhelming Victory Radio or to listen to our partner podcasts, visit overwhelmingvictory.org/OV radio. For CSRM Podcasts, I'm Mike Maloney. Have a blessed day.